This is Left at the Door, a podcast and vlog where 5 insightful friends talk a little bit about the things that we left at the door in order to love, grow, succeed, and survive. These are our stories. I'm Cassie Yoder.
I'm Kabeji Mulamed.
I'm Sara Easter.
I'm Andrew McGee.
And I'm Jessie Porter.
And this is Left at the Door.
So today we are talking to Sara Easter about what she's left at the door. So we're never too young or too old to make that shift. So tell me, at this stage in your life, what do you feel you've left at the door?
Left a lot at the door. I have mainly left conformity at the door. That has been something that has been very prevalent in my life, especially in the past 5 years. I dropped out of college twice, so I don't have a college degree, but I am still working in marketing. And I tour full time, so that's not something you normally hear.
In the music industry.
Yes.
Like, you yourself.
Yeah. I'm not a musician by any means.
Yes.
God definitely did not gift me in that department, but he gifted me in the photography department. So I tour with Past Life. That's the main band that I tour with, but I'm also open to touring with other bands.
So what kind of music is Past Life?
They don't really have a specific genre.
Also non-conformity?
Yes, exactly. I love them. They're kind of they call themselves indie joy rock. So it's just dance with your friends and have a good time kind of fun. So it truly that is not a genre, but it fits them very well.
So Sara, since you're on the cusp of Gen Z and a millennial, how do you feel like your life choices differ from other generations?
I feel like our generation just doesn't value the same things as other generations, and Kabeji, you can speak on this a little bit too because you're in the same boat as me, but I feel like we value putting our passions and our love of certain things before going to work every morning and working the same job for 60 years. I remember reading an article when I was in high school. I think a teacher had suggested it in a class. I don't know what class we were in, but they said that our generation is predicted to change jobs and careers a certain amount of times during a certain amount of, for a certain amount of years. I don't remember the numbers, but I do remember that article being suggested.
I know exactly what you're talking about because I'm pretty sure that we read that in sociology or something in college, because I remember my professor asking us what our passions were instead of what kind of job do you want. Mm-hmm. It was they focused more on what do you love doing, how can you make money doing what you love, as opposed to where's the money at. And I thought that was really different than prior generations where you follow the money.
Yeah, my parents were like that a lot. My dad just did what he had to do.
That's what I was gonna. I feel like it's remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's baseline is survival and just you get the paycheck, which is what many of our parents and grandparents did. You just did what was necessary in order to pay the bills, in order to feed your babies and have a roof above your head and things like that. But now I feel it's almost your generation has really set the tone for flipping that triangle. Mm-hmm. And instead of working your way up to self-actualization, it's let's talk about, you said, Kabeji, let's talk about your passions. Let's start that conversation as opposed to find something that pays the bills, the end. And it's let's talk about who you really are and how that molds you into a future that you actually love, as opposed to just doing things out of necessity.
My cousin called us the YOLO generation. You only live once. And I feel that's definitely kind of who we are. Is we don't want to waste any moments being miserable if we don't have to be. And so, yeah, it totally makes sense that you followed your passion with what you do.
You look at my generation and you see that we don't take shit really from any perspective, whether it's political or job-wise, money-wise. We're always finding ways to make ourselves heard and to not be told no. And we just don't take no for an answer. There's always a way, and I feel that's very prevalent in my generation.
I think, too, that's a big shift in just even the decade between us, the three of us, and the two of you, Kabeji and Sara, in that when I was 23, I got a union job working in a phone company. I was a verbal punching bag. I got yelled at 40 hours a week. And I'm in a room with a bunch of people who've worked there for 30 years, and I was yes, I've made it. I have a job that will pay my bills, provide me with insurance, and because that's just what you did.
Yeah.
And I was there for like 4 years of resolving to just be miserable. And it took outside influence, culturally and socially, to be like, God, you just don't have to live like that. But it's not something I learned from my friends or my parents. It was a completely outside idea that this is not how you spend your life.
How do you feel like, because I think that in many ways, these other generations, and like Jesse brings up, we're, 10 years older than you, whatever, and we've had a different experience. But how do you feel like other generations, I guess, deal with what your attitudes are or your belief systems? Like, how do they react to this non-conformity that you've left at the door?
It depends. It really does depend. I feel like there's no in between. I feel like somebody's always like, what the fuck are you doing? Or I'm totally with you and I see your point. I'm very blessed to have Andrea and Jesse and Cassie by my side because I feel like they definitely always try to see my point. Kaji, you also can speak to this because you're friends with us too. I don't know, I see this a lot with my dad. He has not had the easiest time accepting my life choices. I remember when I dropped out the first time, he was so mad. We just had like a screaming match at each other and it was not fun to experience. But the second time I dropped out, we were going through a lot with my family. My family literally like just blown up and I called him to tell him I was dropping out, and he had also was like just about to call me to tell me that my parents are getting a divorce. So it was just kind of all at the same time, and that sparked a lot of conversations about like why I was doing what I was doing, why it was not good timing, and why he thought I should stay in school and all these things. But I do remember having a couple of conversations about him saying that he is grateful for the way that he lived his life because it gave him my sister and I, but he kind of wishes if we were out of the picture, he wishes that he would have gone and been a crew chief because that was his passion and that's what he always wanted to do, and he never got to do it because he was scared.
What is a crew chief?
So I don't know the exact description, but I did grow up in racing. My dad's obsessed with it, so therefore I was obsessed with it growing up, and racing of all kind, not just NASCAR. And from what I've gathered, it's the fast people that change the tires and stuff.
Stops.
Yes,
in cars.
Stops. They work in the pit stop.
Cars.
See?
Yeah, so like the cars
the
pull
car
over.
reference.
The cars pull over on the side. Oh my God, he's going to be so disappointed when he listens to this. But they pull over on the side, and then there's like a little team of people, and they just run out, they change the tires, they check certain things, I'm sure, and then the car just leaves, and they do it, and it counts as time in the race, so like you have to be as fast as possible. So he always wanted to do stuff like that.
That sounds very exciting.
Yeah, I cannot picture Greg moving fast enough to do that. But I think that it would have been a really cool life had he done it.
And I think that's one of those things where, in a lot of ways, even us, like all of us sitting at this table, we have heard those stories from our parents or from our grandparents, where it's like, I wish I would have done this. I really wanted to do this, but I was afraid to. Or this is what I would have done, but it was just not socially acceptable during my time frame. And that, I think, is the most heartbreaking thing, to hear those stories. And maybe in a lot of ways, maybe that's why we are all in the same boat that we're in, because we're like, that will not be me. Or that will not be the way I'm raising my child. I do not want Jack to look back and have regrets. And if that means non-conformity, then so be it.
Yeah. It's hard, and it's hard to feel like you're disappointing your parents. But then when you actually like sit down and have conversations with them, like the crew chief conversation, and you hear them say that they're proud of you no matter what, that's like what keeps me going. And I also don't want to like get to the end of my life and be like, oh, I didn't do everything that I wanted to do, and I'm disappointed in myself for that. That scares me a lot.
In a way, I feel like it's okay. I know you said you drop out of school twice, and like for our generation, we are so stubborn and want our kids to go to school, and it's important. But for me, I find it's okay. If you want to drop out of school to find yourself, to find what you love, you always have the options to going back to school. You're never too old, you're never too young. You can do it at any time, and that's great. And I feel like our generation we need to start accepting it. We need to accept that we can't pressure kids. Let them find themselves and kind of go from there. Because look at most successful people, half of them drop out of school, and look where they're at. They're billionaires.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't know. I feel like the times that I grew most were when I wasn't in college. And I don't regret going to college because it still gave me things that I never would have had had I not gone. I don't think I would be the photographer that I am today if I hadn't gone to school, but I've realized that I can always go back. I'm going back this semester to get my associates, and I'm taking that small step so then I can take another break, and then I can just screw around for a little bit and grow some more in a different way, because school is not one size fits all, and it's important to get your education if that's what you want, but it's also important to grow in other ways than just go to school right out of college, go to this college that, you know, may or may not be worth it, and then get a job and work it for 40 years and then retire.
And then you're left with debt too.
Yeah,
There's that. I think that you especially if you don't know what you're wanting to do, you at least have a career path that you're like, okay, I generally know. But from my experience of teaching at Richland Community College, I had so many students that they had no idea what they were wanting to be. And it was like they were just sitting in those seats because it was expected of them. But then I also had the opposite side. Like, I mean, that's how I met Andrea. I met Andrea at Richland. She was in my class. I had a group of students that were what you would consider your non-traditional students, meaning they weren't 18 and right out of high school. So anything that's just a little bit past that is considered a non-traditional student. But ultimately, those students obviously became some of my closest friends because maybe they were laid off. So then they were going back to school, but they were taking a different career path. And all of a sudden you realize that sometimes your values change and shift over time. And it's like you're able to take your life experiences and then you're like, okay, now that I've had those experiences, which is I feel like what you've picked up through travel, through being on tour, then you're like, okay, now how do I apply this? And maybe now I want to put this passion in marrying a passion into a career. So
I mean, people think I was a business major the entire 2.5 years I was there. I changed my major 6 times in 2 years, and they weren't all in the School of Business. I was an art major, I was a teaching major, I was a youth ministry major, I was a marketing major, and then I went back to art because I wanted to teach art. I was all over the place, and that ultimately put me behind in courses because the school that I was at starts you off in your major courses, which is a good and a bad thing, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. I still don't want to be in marketing forever. Cassie, I know that's going to break your heart because you're my boss, but I don't want to be in marketing forever. Sorry.
It's okay.
But, I mean, like, there's all these things that I want to do, and I think one of the things that the traditional lifestyle tells us is that you can only do one career path. You can't change your mind. You can't switch it up. You can't be a marketing professional one day and then go teach art the next day. You just have to stay on one path.
And that creates stress and anxiety because this is an enormous decision I have to make and it's going to impact the rest of my life. And it totally takes away from that, like, I'm going to do what feels right and acknowledging, like, I won't be the same person in 5 years and that's a good thing. And that if my passions change, so can my plan. So what kind of influence has your career path and the jobs you've done had on this idea that nonconformity is for you?
That's a good question.
I feel like it's not as much my career path as it is just the way I've always been. I think I take after my dad a lot. As much as I hate to admit it, I love my dad, but we are the same person. He was always the black sheep of the family, always did what he wanted, always pursued what he wanted to. He even went as far as to be a Cubs fan and a family full of Cardinals fans. And if you live in Decatur, Illinois, then you understand how much he wanted to be the black sheep of the family when I say that. But anyway, I just naturally took after him. I always wanted to drop out of high school. That was the thing that I pestered my parents about.
You aspired to be a high school dropout?
It wasn't that I aspired, I hated it. They weren't going to let me do online school, and I was like, what's the point? I hate high school. I hate public school. I don't want to do this. And they never let me, so I didn't. So after high school, I went to college because they wanted me to. And then I pulled the same stuff. I was like, after like half a semester, I was like, I'm not coming back. This is stupid. And given part of it was the college that I went to, but I think that experience of going to a college that was so niche down in the type of person that should be attending it. I was not the kind of person that should be attending that school. And I'm not trashing it by any means. It's a good school. It's just not for me. That whole experience kind of opened this, I guess, sent me down this rabbit hole of like, what else can I do? And also having friends in the music scene, you know, they're always finding different ways to live aside from corporate America. I think I only have one friend out of all of the friends in the music scene that I know that works an office job. And I have a lot of friends in the music scene. So he is, I never know what they're called, physicists, the ones that are like astronauts. He's not an astronaut. He wishes he was. His name is Dash, so he calls himself a dastronaut. But anyway, so that all like taught me that there are other ways of doing life. You don't just have to get a degree and go to an office. You can bartend and make pretty dang good money doing it and tour, and you can be a barista, which I was for a while, and they were totally fine with me touring. And then I met Cassie, and I told her that I tour, and she was like, oh, okay, what do you want me to do with this information? And I was like, just letting you know. So I think meeting those people and like hearing how they've done things has taught me, but I mean, you know, career path a little bit has, because I've met people like Cassie who are her age and don't see one way to life.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up. I feel like whenever you brought up that in our conversation, I'm sure you're probably thinking, okay, Cassie's like corporate America to some degree. and my reaction wasn't like that. And I think maybe part of that is because I have had the ability to work from home, to work remote, to start up my own business and run it the way that I want, much to maybe, we're going to say friends, quote unquote, people in your life that are like, oh, well, if you're not working 8 to 5, if you're not going somewhere and physically clocking in to one and only one location, is it really a job? And now my personal family was supportive, but I had people in my life that didn't understand it. It's not a real career if you're not literally physically clocking in and clocking out somewhere at 8 o'clock and then at 5 o'clock. And so for you to say that, I was like, oh, cool, that adds depth. And like, I remember you showing me like your portfolio from all of like being on tour and whatnot. And I think that that's a huge lesson to me, that when it comes to careers and life, like you can't teach passion. You just can't. You can find a good hire and you can teach them the logistics of your job and the industry and whatnot. And there's many things that a person is going to pick up on. But if they are not a passionate person who wants to see the world and be a part of experiences, and I don't care what industry you're in, it's not, you can't train that. You can't teach that to somebody. And I realized that sitting down with you.
So I want to go back to what you said about, you know, our parents think, or people think, clocking in and clocking out. Well, we're in a pandemic and a lot of people are working at home.
Yeah.
So I don't think people fully understand our job. You know, they think, I know some, I don't know about you guys, but I know some people think that we don't work. They really
if you don't have
like,
a physical building that you're going into.
Exactly. And they don't understand. They think that you're home, or I'm sure, do you get that sometimes?
Oh yeah,
like,
all the time.
Like, what do you do? Because I'm sure they just see you sitting down, and you're a coffee drinker, and you have a love for coffee. So I'm sure they see that, like, oh, Sarah's just drinking her coffee. So I'm sure you get that a lot, that people just think that you're just at your computer drinking coffee and not realizing you're actually working. So I don't think they fully understand that, and that's what's great about the pandemic. So Sarah, you have a love for coffee and going to different places. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I freaking love coffee. I love it so much. I have an Instagram, so if you want to follow me, it's CitySipShe. And the she part is spelled CHI because it's Chicago. I'm mainly based in Chicago because that's where I live, but I love to travel, and I also do highlight Central Illinois stuff. I also have a YouTube, which you can find me. It's just Sarah Easter, and I review my coffee shops on there too. I love coffee, and it is overwhelming how many coffee shops are in the city of Chicago. Oh my gosh. Every Sunday, that's usually my coffee day. I go through my Instagram and I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I choose? Because there's so many good ones. But yeah, I usually, during a normal world when we can work in coffee shops, I love to go to a different coffee shop and sit down for like 5 hours. Normally, I feel like people sit there for like 2 or 3. No, I'm there for like 5 to 8 hours, like the whole day. Kabaji can attest to this.
That's how I met her.
Yeah.
She would literally spend about 7 hours straight, like my whole shift of Starbucks, sitting there working.
Yep.
Wow.
I would
Making
come
her
up
coffee,
multiple times.
bring her a drink, ask her how her day is, go back to my job, turn around, she's still there.
Just working. And I guarantee you I was just working on my website or something that didn't need to be worked on because that's how I fill my time.
So who's more passionate about coffee?
Yeah,
then?
I know. That's
Oh, no hesitation. It's Sarah.
Absolutely, Sarah. That's my job.
Yeah, so Kebeji via Cassie has said that I don't have adrenal glands because I can drink coffee at like 10 o'clock at night and be fine, which she's probably right.
Like her adrenal glands are shot. Have you ever heard that? Like if somebody can like drink coffee and like not fall, and then they don't, it doesn't keep them up and stuff like that. I'm not that way.
Yeah, I used to work, well, I still work at Starbucks, but I used to work nights during the week. So I would be up until like 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock, and I will have drink a 6-shot white mocha right before I get home, and I go home, and then I knock out, and I wake up on time the next day. And so now it just nothing works on me. So
yeah, and that's 3 cups of coffee in 1 cup if nobody understands espresso.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That is 1 year worth of caffeine for me.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's like it reminds me of a time that I was at the assisted living and there for a marketing meeting, and they have this espresso machine, and I was like, I'm just not I'll drink coffee and whatever, and I'm having a conversation with someone. I put my cup underneath the machine, and I thought that I was hitting the cappuccino, and it just like pours out like in 2 seconds. And I was like, well, this is broken. So I hit it again. And so then the whole time having this conversation with our CFO, I'm just keep hitting the cappuccino. I was like, somebody needs to work on this because it's clearly broken. So I take my coffee mug in, and I was like, I take a drink. I'm like, this is the worst tasting cappuccino. It is definitely broken.
Yeah, the shots are probably dead by the time that you put in 12 of them.
100%. It was like 5 shots of espresso. And I sat there and I drank that thing through that meeting. And midway through, I start like feeling, my pulse going through my neck. And I was like, I'm having a heart attack. And so I tell everybody at the meeting, I was like, I have to take just a real quick time out. I need to get a drink of water. And I walked myself to the nurse's station. And I sat down and I was told the nurse, I was like, I think I'm dying. So I literally, I don't know how you do it because that experience alone, I was like, I'll never touch espresso again. So there's my input.
Lattes is espresso.
And I can do that. But 12 of them in a full glass and chugging it.
I could do that.
You could.
Yeah.
You both could.
So whenever I drove to North Carolina, my best friend lives in Jacksonville, North Carolina. That's on the coast. So it's not on like the eastern or the western part of North Carolina. It's on the coast. I drove 15 hours in one day there, drove 15 hours one day back, didn't stop unless I needed gas or coffee. That's it. And I drank, I think, 6 grande lattes in one day on the way there, plus 2 huge cups of cold brew, and same on the way back.
Cold brew is strong, and every grande latte comes with 2 shots of espresso.
So I had 12 shots of
12 shots of espresso. And then cold brew is strong.
2
That will
24
wake
ounce
you up.
cold brews.
Yeah.
Death.
Yeah.
Instantaneous death. And you're like,
I got there and I went straight to sleep.
So all the moms out there who would like coffee, you just ask Sarah or even Kebeji. They'll help
Probably
you.
send them back
I
to
know,
Sarah.
but because I know you ever hear that saying, what's a mom goes, what's the strongest coffee you have? It's Monday. Just another mom day, with the kids.
you can just be a coffee consultant.
But, guys, if you guys see Sarah at your coffee shop, it's not that she's not working. She is totally working, and she's very creative, and I admire her about that. She also could be reviewing your coffee shop, giving your coffee shop reviews, so make sure you treat her nice.
She's putting in the work for you.
Exactly. And, so it's really great, and great to go follow her on her YouTube, and because it's amazing. I actually watched it, so yeah, there you go.
That means a lot.
But, and back to your career, and people not thinking you're working. Now they know.
Yeah.
Now they know you're actually working, and that's really great.
I feel like it ties into that whole non-conformity thing.
It is.
You don't have an office and you move around a lot, and that's like, it's a purposeful thing. And I think that sometimes that you're more productive when you're not having to just sit in a cubicle the entire time. So
I feel like a lot of people have realized that during the pandemic, because now you're just sitting at home at your desk at home all day long, and then you're going from your desk to your bed once you're done with your work, and it's hard to do that. You can't just move around from coffee shop to coffee shop, or start your day in the office and end it at a coffee shop, something like that, which would be nice, but we can't do that right now, and so it's hard to get work done.
I think it's sometimes harder to do that and work from home right now. I mean, I work from home and I go into the building for work, and so it's like constant taking boxes home, taking boxes back. And so I think that at least like whenever you're at home, like, yes, you can do your work in the comfort of your own home, but there are so many distractions, and you have to have a lot of self-control, as opposed to like whenever you're in the office. You can't just go and get coffee and just hang out for an hour, and you have to tell yourself, don't do that whenever you're working from home.
And watch an episode of Bridgerton or whatever.
Yes.
This is my lunch break.
What do you think everyone else could gain from leaving conformity at the door?
That's a good question. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and they don't come all at once. They come all throughout the journey, but I think it's important to focus on your passions and how your passions can bring in revenue over just working a dead-end job and burning yourself out.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. That leads to finding yourself and learning more about yourself. And I guess it's not really something that you can learn, but it's something to run with, that there's always something to be learned, there's always something to grow, or there's always room to grow. And you may find yourself working a job that you never thought you would work, but you absolutely love it because you left your dead-end job and you wanted to pursue something. And it just leads you down a rabbit hole of things that you never thought. Like, I've been on TV before, solely because of Cassie. Never thought I'd be on TV. Half the shoots that I've done with her, never ever thought I would do. So it just, I think, running with whatever you choose to do and letting it take you wherever you go.
One of those things that you have talked about when it comes to, you said the word passion before, finding your passion. And I go back to that Liz Gilbert book, Big Magic, where she talks about how sometimes the misconception is that you have to have a passion and it has to make you money. And then when you tie your income to your passion, your creativity gets drained, or it becomes so much of a pressure that you no longer enjoy that passion. And I think that you're a living, breathing example of like figuring out ways around that so that your passion is still your passion. It's still photography and it's still there, or it's still touring with music, but you're finding other ways. And there's a lot of listeners and viewers that have maybe that little voice in their head that's like, I love doing this, or I love doing that. But I think they just assume I have to 100% dive in and that has to be my income.
Yeah. And I also want to harp on the fact that even if you have kids, you have so many obligations, you can still do it. I know I don't have kids. I know I'm 22, but you can still do it. I have a friend who was just a stay-at-home mom for the longest time. She has 3 kids. I love her to death. Mary knows that she's being talked about right now and she's listening to this. But given she wasn't 40 when she went back to school, but I think she did like 1 or 2 semesters of community college and then stopped, and she had 3 kids. She's in a happy marriage. And then all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, she decided to go back to school online, and she is starting her master's degree today. And she has 3 kids and 3 huge dogs, a small dog, a cat, a bunch of snails, God knows what else in her household. And she's a teacher on top of it. You can do it. It doesn't take rocket science to make time. The quote, I'm not a big fan of Beyonce, but I was a dancer, so I kind of am. The quote, you have the same amount of hours in a day as Beyonce, that always runs through my head.
I don't agree.
Really?
I don't agree with that, because
really? Interesting.
Your time, this is actually, I feel very strongly about this, because let's say that we're talking to someone who has a car, has a job, and every day they wake up 7 o'clock, go to work, get home at 5. That is a different amount of time that they have than someone who has to take the bus, because they have to like add in the time that it takes for them to get on the bus, all of the stops that it takes to get to work, all the stops it takes to get home, Plus, how are they getting from the bus stop home? Are they walking? So by the time they get home, it might not be till like 7:30. So in reality, the time of the day that we have compared to Beyonce, like, honestly, Beyonce has people to do things for her. We don't. And, taking it back, we might have a certain amount of time in the day, but people who might not have what we have, they don't. And so I feel like it's actually super harmful to say, not you specifically, but just like, because I see it on Facebook all the time, saying that we all collectively as humans have the same amount of time. My time, even though I work a trillion jobs, is different than the time that my friends with kids have, because wrangling 3 children into a car, takes more time than just me hopping in the car. If I have to be somewhere at 9 o'clock, I can leave at 8:50 and make it there on time. As opposed to my friend who wakes up at 5:45 every morning, gets herself ready, wakes her kids up, gets them ready, gets them fed, etc., to start off her day. So in reality, we don't really have the same time as everyone else in a day. If I'm making sense.
I see what you're saying, but I mean, like, I didn't have my car in Chicago at first, so I understand the whole bus thing, and like, I think we do have the same amount of time. It's just how we spend our time. Like, what are you doing on that bus stop? Are you scheduling posts, if you're passionate with social media, you know what I mean? And I understand that kids take a long time, but, it's just how you spend your day, what time you wake up, things like that.
I was going to make the same point.
Yeah.
Like, I think the point Kabeji makes is so valid, and it's a testament to the difference between people who are disadvantaged and impoverished not having the same time of the day. But like what you said, what are you doing on the bus? Are you reading? Are you networking? Are you doing something to better yourself? And like, as someone who has kids, I wasn't listening to Sara go, well, of course you can do all that because you don't have kids. Because it's a mindset thing. The Beyonce quote is a mindset thing, I think. And it really is about, like, what are your priorities?
That's what I was going to chip in. I feel like, to me, it's about priorities as opposed to, like, physically, truly...
Resources.
Yeah. But I do think both of those things really do tie in a lot of ways. Because I look at, Andrea and Jesse and I, we do have kids. The two of you are not at that stage yet where you don't have kids. But at the same time, I'm different because I'm a single mom. So I don't have the spousal support or someone. And yet, I still make time to somehow launch a podcast. We start a collective and I still run a marketing firm. So sometimes when it comes to that quote, I think about it as priorities where I'm like, there's times that I'm like, yeah, I could be... sitting and watching TV, or I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and jot down like a couple things that I want to achieve this month and start kind of back playing it as to like, what do I need to do if I want to hit those goals? Like what time is it going to take? Or, a lot of times I take Jack to like Elevate, like him and his buddy go to the trampoline park. Well,
you're being a cool mom and you're getting work done.
Exactly. Like he's happy. He gets to go do something. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take my computer with me and I'm going to work while I'm there. I'm going to work ahead and stuff. So that's what my take on it is, that it really is just about what you are prioritizing during the time that you're given. Yeah.
Also, to be fair, we are saying this as two people who have the resources to make those choices.
Yeah.
And that hasn't always been the case for me, especially not having a car, not having a license, having to work 40 plus hours and going to college, because I've lived that life. I've walked that path. I did not like it. I was like, this is not what I want. Same thing with hitting the jackpot at 23 and getting a shitty job that paid all my bills and made me miserable. This is not what I want to be doing. So it's hard when you're in that place of like feeling like you don't have choices, hearing like, we have the same hours in the day, what's the problem? How that would be hurtful to hear.
Yeah.
But also I think that the type of person who's like aspiring and they want better for their lives, they're going to find a way to take little baby steps and bite off little chunks to do something for self-improvement too.
Yeah. I guess what I would say to that person is just take away what points speak to you from what we're saying and apply it to your life in the way that it best applies. So it doesn't all have to apply to your life. If you have kids, obviously it's going to be a little different than me, or if you don't have enough money to hire on an assistant just yet, it's going to be a little different than Cassie. But, You know, it's...
And that's what I was thinking about because, you know, I started my business in 2005. You didn't, you know, I didn't start getting the employees and stuff like that till 2020. So for 15 years, it was hustle and grind. And like that, I think is the thing that I look at, whether you are in an established career, whether you're finding yourself, whether you're in school trying to determine even what you want to do, or whether a degree is even necessary for the life you want to live. I think that ultimately it comes down to like, there's a lot of behind the scenes hustle and a lot of behind the scenes being miserable that happens before you get to a point where you're like, okay, like they're growing pains, I guess, more or less, where it's like, you don't just walk in and all of a sudden someone's like, oh, here's your perfect everything, your perfect job, your perfect house. No, like, it's just not that way. It's not a realistic perspective.
I think maybe 5 people knew I was homeless last year. I spent almost all of 2020 homeless until I pulled myself out of that. So nobody sees that stuff.
Yeah.
And don't look at people who are successful or who are working towards being successful and think that they don't have it hard just because they're not showing it. I've had it hard. You know, we've all 5 of us here that are sitting here have had it hard. But it's just how you handle that hard and where you go with it and what you do with it.
I think that's the point of this podcast, that you get the real version of everybody and that it is okay to be real. And Instagram and Facebook and social media of all kinds, we portray the best, most perfect versions of ourselves, of our lives, of our marriages, of our friendships. And all of a sudden it becomes this level of like, well, I'm not that good, or I don't have that career, or I don't have that relationship. And all of a sudden you're judging yourself based upon that. So part of these stories of talking about what we've left at the door and when guests come on about what they left at the door, I think is really the essence of what we do. Like, I even think about my own like Instagram. Like, I try to post like a little bit of both, where I'm like, oh, here's the good stuff, and then I'm like, oh, this happened with Jack. And like, Kabeji knows me through Jack's school. Like, she, you know, Jack goes to the school that she works at, and I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that I'm like, hey, so do we have school today? or she'll be like, hey, it's picture day tomorrow, just heads up.
Because she knows you.
She knows. I'm like, my mom was not that way. She knew everything when everything was fun. And I am just not. And I don't pretend to be. And I think that that's one of those things where I'm like, it is okay for other moms to see you don't have it together. It is okay for if somebody doesn't have kids to say, it's okay to not have kids. It's okay to not be married. It's okay to not have degrees. And that doesn't make you any less successful, doesn't make you any less perfect. And I feel like that's a huge essence of this podcast. Maybe your episode should have been like the pilot. Of like, it's
I'm the star.
Sarah's the star of Left at the Door.
Yes.
So I think if you want more information on Sara, and also we'll put links to your YouTube and your Instagram, and of course, like learning more about Left at the Door, you can find that on Instagram and Facebook. Plus, if you want to see the vlog version, you can go over to YouTube. Left at the Door can be found on there as well. We thank you for joining us. And if you have any insight or feedback, let's comment and send us a message about what you think about when it comes to nonconformity, Sara, and if there's any things and pieces about this episode that really relate to you and to your experience. We'd love to hear about them. Thanks for watching. This has been
Left at the Door.